Did you know Super Awesome Mix has an app? Go to the Apple App Store today and download Super Awesome Mix. It's free. You could start creating and sending your own digital mixtapes in just a few clicks. Also, there's links to our Instagram account and a link where you can follow your favorite podcast. Speaking of which, welcome back to another Super Awesome Mix. My name is Matt Sidholm, alongside my co-host and co-founder of Super Awesome Mix, Samer Abu Salbi. Samer, how are we doing this week?
I am doing excellent because I can't believe it. We are hitting another milestone, and specifically our 80th episode.
Yeah, this is our 80th Super Awesome Mix that we've put together. And so we had no other choice, right? I mean, we had to do a totally 80s mixtape, right?
Yes. We had no choice. And it's funny because as I was putting this together, if you listen to my birthday mix, I think we may have mentioned that Matt's original idea for my birthday mix was that I do something about songs released in the 80s at least. And I was like, no, I'm not going to do that because I'm not a big fan of music from the 80s. But here we are. It caught up to me. We did an 80s episode. And I had more fun with this than I thought I would. But there's definitely some songs in here where I was like, well, I heard it once. I took notes on it. And that's the end of that.
My wife always says she is not a fan of the 80s. But then we'll come across a song and she'll be like, oh, I love this song. And I'm like, yeah, this is from the 80s. I was like, I don't think you could dismiss a whole 10 years of music. Right.
It would be difficult to do that, yeah.
Yeah, like I get it. Like sort of your typical 80s sound people may not be into. But, there's a ton of good music. And you could find good music in every decade, I think.
I agree. We'd be hard-pressed to find 10 years, as you said, where not a single good song came.
Yeah, not one song.
If you know of a decade, again, reach out to us at Super Awesome Mix. We'd love to hear it if you could argue.
It would have to be something like the 1920s when it was just like there just wasn't a huge volume of music, right?
Right. Well, it's funny you mentioned that because I've been watching a horror show because I love watching horror around Halloween. And they, there's a scene in it where they feature music, I think from like the 20s or 30s, and it is creepy as all hell. And I just am thinking to myself, like, was all music just really creepy and unsettling back then? Or do they just find the creepy music from the 20s?
Well, I think it was a reflection of life at that time,
Right.
So...
Oh, my goodness. Yeah. Terrible.
Yeah, just very unsettling. But you know what? The 80s were not unsettling. It was kind of a happy time. Some people may say overly optimistic, but I think we got a lot of great songs out of it.
Yes, the 80s were indeed an interesting time, to say the least. But let's kick off our mix here. And track number 1 is your pick, and you went with Wake Me Up Before You Go by Wham.
Yeah, can you open an 80s mix with any other song? No. Just get the quiet, and then it's Jitterbug. This song is ridiculous. The video is ridiculous, but I will listen to it over and over again. I have sung it in karaoke before. Everybody knows this one. But I've got kind of a tangentially related story to this that I want to tell.
Right.
Okay, so the members of Wham, of course, very famously George Michael, and then not as famously Andrew Ridgeley was his partner in Wham, right? And I had a job when I was much younger where, people would answer the phone at different times, right? I wasn't always the first person on the phone, right? And then they'd come into your office, hey, so-and-so's on line 4. One day, this woman walks into my office and she said, Matt, Brandon Walsh is on line 4. And so I'm immediately like, this is somebody I know, right? Because Brandon Walsh was a character from 90210. And I go, I'm sorry, what did you say? And she goes, Brandon Walsh. And so I pick it up, and it's my brother, and he's just laughing his ass off because he's like, what an idiot. Like, who would have thought Brandon Walsh was calling, right? So once I tell my friends this, it starts this deluge of people. Like all my friends would call the office and just try with these fake names to get past like whoever was picking up the phone at that time. If it wasn't me, like they would get upset if I picked up my office phone, right?
Yeah.
And one day somebody said, "Hey, Andrew Ridgely's on line 4," and I was like, I don't know an Andrew Ridgely, so I pick it up and it's one of my friends, and I was like, and he's like, "Hey, it's me." I was like, "Oh, what name did you use?" It's like Andrew Ridgely. That's the other guy in Wham. I was like, "Oh man." Definitely did not remember the other guy in Wham. Yeah.
I mean, that's like a deep cut name, I feel. Like, if
It
you're
is
going
a
to try to
deep
get
cut
in.
name.
Yeah.
There is no doubt. There is no doubt. And this was the early 2000s. So it's not like, I mean, this is 20 years after he was famous, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so now we're 40 years on. So don't expect a lot of our listeners to be able to pull Andrew Ridgely, but I certainly wasn't able to that fateful day once upon a time. Yeah.
That's awesome. Nice story. I liked it.
All right. Your first pick, and this one kind of surprised me, and I'll talk about that in a moment. But your first pick, I love the song, "I'm Gonna Be," parentheses, 500 Miles by the Proclaimers.
Yeah. I went with 80 songs, and I wrote here, I'm just going to read what I wrote in my notes. I went with 80 songs I can actually stand and enjoy to listen to. And this, the bar was pretty high, let me tell you. This is top of that list. I mean, I remember actually getting this like back when I don't remember what company it was, but like you would get cassettes in the mail, you know, and like I think this came on like a mixtape.
Oh yeah, like the Columbia House or
something like that. Yeah, I think like my
right.
sister signed up for it at some point, and so like this came on a cassette, and I heard this song, and I was like, oh my god, I love this song. Like it was just so addicting to listen to. I was very young. I had it on repeat for months and months and months, and learned all the words, or at least I thought I did, because in reading through some of these lyrics, I was like, oh, that's what he's saying there. Because he's saying like, and if I have her rather than if I waver. I always thought it was if I waver, but he's saying like haver. Anyway, who knows?
What does haver mean? Did you ever look that up? I know that line, but I've never like looked into it. I feel like maybe it's a Scottish thing I'm just unfamiliar with.
Right. Yeah. it's something, it does have a meaning. It's like a slang term, but I'm forgetting on what it means.
Okay. Well, yeah, one of our Scotland listeners to chime in, clue us in. We could use the internet, but we'd love to hear from you.
Right. Exactly. So yeah, so that is why I picked this song, because I just have ties to my childhood listening to it. And you know what? It's like infinitely repeatable. You could just listen to this song over and over again, you know, maybe while you're walking 1,000 miles to someone's door. I think it'd be an appropriate song for that journey.
Okay, so when I saw this on your list, I was like, wait a minute. He didn't understand the assignment, because I remember the song from the 90s because it was featured in a movie called Benny and June, which I believe starred Johnny Depp. And it was like on the soundtrack and got really famous from that movie. And then I looked it up, and this song is from 1987. So I was like, well, what do you know? He was right. But I always thought of it as a 90s song. Right.
That's so funny, because I think that happens a lot, right? Like you hear the song and then you just decide that it must be from the time that you heard it.
Yes.
I think it's a very human thing to do. Like,
well, how many people thought Bohemian Rhapsody came out in like 1991 with Wayne's World, right?
Right. Or worse, it came out like last year with the the movie with Rami Malek playing Freddie Mercury. They're like, oh my God, I love the song that came with that movie.
Wait. So you're telling me people saw the Queen biopic, which was set in a time and place, and then we're like, look at this new music. These guys are just coming out with new music from Queen.
I bet in a planet of 7 billion people, one person may have thought that this was new music. If you are that one person, again, reach out to us. Let us know.
Don't they timestamp things in that movie? Actually, I would love to hear from, if you were watching that movie with someone who was just like, thought it was either science fiction or was like, hey, how about all this new music from the guy from Mr. Robot? Huh?
He's really talented.
He's really talented. Did you know he can sing like this?
sing, he can act, he does it all.
Oh my gosh.
Speaking of movies, let's move on. Okay, your next track is from a movie called Footloose, and the track is Footloose by Kenny Loggins.
I love the movie Footloose. I love the soundtrack to Footloose. I'm pretty sure I've mentioned it before. Talking about the original one with Kevin Bacon. Kenny Loggins, by the way, wrote like 5 or 6 like really good songs from both good and not so good movies in the 80s. Like it was like anytime a movie was looking for a theme song, they would send the movie to Kenny Loggins and he would knock out a song that just fit right along with the movie. I mean, it was remarkable. I mean, in addition to Footloose, he did Caddyshack. He did Caddyshack 2, which, I mean, I think I'm the only one who has seen that. You know, me and maybe my siblings.
I didn't know there was a second one.
Yeah, don't bother, is what I would say. Yeah, like it's not even one of those, well, next time you're doing your taxes, watch that movie. No, don't even do that. Yeah, don't worry about it.
Got it.
Okay, but just know it exists. Over the Top. Remember the arm wrestling movie with Sylvester Stallone?
I don't know.
Okay, well, all right. Again, you're going to hate it. Okay, other people out there might like it, but I'm going to go ahead and call it several will hate this movie. Yeah, but he wrote the theme to that. Anyway, a lot of... and then Danger Zone, Top Gun. Okay, yeah, you've definitely seen that one. So there's another one. Of course. Yeah, but I mean, Footloose, again, this is a movie definitely worth watching. It's a little ridiculous, but it's pretty good. A ton of great actors in it, too, if you watch it. It's really well acted. And, yeah, just a classic theme song.
Nice. All right. Well, I don't want to get too far off of, the topic, but you and Jen did tell me to watch St. Elmo's Fire, and I did not like that movie. And so I'm really worried about getting any recommendations of 80s films.
I think you'll find Footloose less objectionable.
Okay. All right.
I'm not going to say not objectionable. I'm going to say less objectionable. How about that?
Right. I mean, because it's the 80s. There's so much stuff back then.
There's so much more stuff that was acceptable. But this town, it's super conservative. I feel like you could kind of like get into it maybe in the sense that you're like, yeah, these people are just a little misguided. I think you could kind of, because I think a lot of the questionable behavior may come from that than anything else. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. Okay. All right, so speaking of 80s movies, all right, you go with another classic from an 80s movie, parentheses, Don't You, out of parentheses, Forget About Me by Simple Minds.
Yes, Don't You Forget About Me. A song we've actually featured before on our parenthetical mix because it's, it's one where we question, does it really even need the parentheses? And here we are
again.
It
really doesn't.
I don't think it does. Yeah, I don't think it does. But I loved the movie. I mean, I'm a huge John Hughes fan. That is something, he was just so talented at making these like classic family-friendly, heartwarming like films. And it's so funny because, as we talked about on the mix, like this was like, I love the story behind it, how this song came together. They literally, the band just like recorded it. They said in a couple of hours, 2 or 3 hours, and then quote, promptly forgot about it because it was just a song that, they just like showed up, did it, knocked it out and went home. It was previously offered to like Billy Idol and a bunch of other musicians who all turned it down. And again, as we've talked about it, you have to wonder, are they just full of regret? I mean, maybe not Billy Idol because he has plenty of other hits, but like this could have been another one, like it's, I do love this song. Like this is a quintessential 80s song for me. And it's, it's a great film too. The Breakfast Club is amazing. I haven't watched it in a while. So like, it might not be amazing anymore, but I remember really enjoying it when I watched it many, many years ago.
I don't think it, I think it, I feel like I saw it in the last few years and it still holds up, right? Just in the sense that I think they do a good job and not everything translates, obviously. I mean, the movie's almost 40 years old now, but I mean, obviously there's going to be some things that occurred in the 80s that maybe aren't relatable now, but just the fact that I think everybody can relate to the cliques that exist within the high school setting or even junior high, right?
Right.
Like, and all the things that go along with it there. So that I think even if like a teenager were like, yeah, this is lame, whatever, internally he'd be like, yeah, I kind of get where these guys are coming from, you know?
Yeah, exactly. It touches the heart. Universal. But yeah, great song. Absolutely love it. One of my favorite from the 80s. So let's move on to track 5, a song I was actually not familiar with, and one that I did not hate. So that's great. It's a good start. And this is Goodbye to You by Scandal.
Yeah, Scandal's most famous hit might be The Warrior, if you're familiar with that one.
Yes.
But lead singer Patti Smythe married to John McEnroe, actually. But I really like this song. It's got such a strong, like, just 80s sound to it, right? Like, you absolutely know when this song was written. But I think she's got such a great singing voice. And I love the lyrics to it. And I think it all just works to make a very, like, listenable song and something still relatable now. It's not dated in any way, except for, again, kind of that 80s sound. But the lyrics certainly aren't.
Yeah, I agree. The lyrics are great. It's like a kind of a great breakup song too. There's some great lines in here, like "It's over now, no need to talk about it. It's not the same. My love's for you, just not the same." And it's like, whew, those are some real sharp words to sing to someone. There's no double meaning there.
No.
And yeah, it was funny because I was like, this lead singer sounds so familiar to me. And then of course it was Patti, and I was like, right, I am familiar with her. So I really enjoyed this one. Yeah, I was happy to hear it. So nice one. Good pick.
Nice. All right, next up, track 6. You go with You Spin Me Round, parentheses, Like a Record by Dead or Alive.
Yeah, really big on parentheticals, I guess, in the 80s. It was a theme there. Another all-time favorite of mine from the 80s that I have like a lot of memories listening to. It's such an earworm. Like you can sing that chorus over and over and over again. I love kind of the disco and like techno mashup going on here. Like that's also kind of peak 80s, I think, in a song. They were really getting into like electronics. Like we were coming off of, late 70s with the creation of disco and like really leaning into that. The other thing that I loved about this that is just pure 80s is that apparently the producers worked on this for like 36 hours and it's noted that they were helped by cocaine because of course they were, because it was the 80s.
I love that that's a note,
Right. Yeah, so I guess it is like a co-author, cocaine.
Yeah,
cocaine helped make this song possible.
Look, I'm not trying to advocate drug use, but you know what? I mean, we got some pretty good music out of it, right? Hey, if we're trying to look at the bright side of things, guys, I mean, hey, got a pretty good track out of it, right?
Brought to you by Dare to say no.
Yeah, but that being said, kids, say no to drugs, okay? But
exactly.
Sometimes it's not all bad. Anyway, yeah, this is a great song. It's got such a strong intro, like just right from the beginning. It hits hard. I remember the beginning of The Wedding Singer, Adam Sandler's movie, and this is the song that they open with, and it's just awesome. It kind of just gets the energy going immediately in that movie. But yeah, great song, classic 80s.
Nice. All right. And speaking of classic 80s, we actually got 2 really strong ones here coming up. Your first pick, though, of these 2 is Panama by Van Halen.
Yeah, my older sister had the Van Halen 1984 album, right? And I was like 7 when it came out. So I remember like hearing this and Jump and Hot for Teacher, and like that whole album was just awesome, right? And so it brings back a lot of, good memories for me. And I think this was the last album Van Halen did with David Lee Roth before Sammy Hagar entered the group. But just, I mean, I think Jen Tully, our fellow co-host on the Super Awesome Mix Network, I think she's a fan of the Sammy Hagar Van Halen. And I think they put out a lot of great albums. I'm not going to deny that, right? But I just think David Lee Roth's voice, along with Eddie Van Halen's guitar, I think there's just something special about that combination there. And so Panama, just an awesome song.
It is, yeah. I mean, this is one that I was definitely familiar with. I loved learning this little tidbit about it, which is that they were being criticized that they only sang or wrote songs about hard partying, hot women, and fast cars. To which David Lee Roth actually responded they'd never written a song about a fast car. And so hence Panama was born, because apparently it's reportedly about the drag car racer Panama Express, or a car called Panama Express or something. That's one part I didn't fully understand, but I just love that little bit where it's like, wait, we've never written about fast cars, so here we go. Let's do it.
Hold on a minute, okay?
Right. How dare you come at us with those words of untruth?
Yeah, like the record producer for Dead or Alive, like he's listening to the show right now, and he's like, "Hey, man, we only did pot. There was no cocaine."
Right. Apologies.
He's like, "How dare you?" Yeah,
Didn't
appreciate that. You came with a pretty strong choice here. You went with "Sweet Child O' Mine" by Guns N' Roses.
Yeah, like this is one of those moments where I was like, "Oh, right, this song is from the '80s." Like, I'm so excited I get to put such a good song on this '80s mix. I didn't have to dig deep. Yeah. Oh my goodness, like those opening notes have got to be probably one of the most iconic like opening notes to a song, where like if you were playing Hurdle, which is like the song version of Wordle, like who would not get this song, right? Like this would have like a 99% success rate of someone getting it just off of those opening notes. And apparently really was just like Slash was just playing around on his guitar. Axl was like, wait, that sounds pretty awesome. And they just went with it after that. They started putting this song together off of those first couple of notes. So I love it. Just an amazing rock song. Apparently the guitar solo was also done in a single take. And he also notes that he didn't even care about it. Like he was just like, whatever. And he's like annoyed that people
about it.
Right. Like he's annoyed that people consider it the greatest guitar solo of all time. And I don't understand that, but wow.
Just whatever, man. Just whatever. Yeah.
Just whatever.
That's pretty rock and roll to just be like, yeah, I don't care. Whatever. Yeah. About that,
Yeah. Amazing.
You're exactly right though. You said at the beginning you didn't even realize this was from the 80s, and I think it's because it's been featured in like television and film since then. Like even this summer, Thor: Love and Thunder, right? Like they're playing "Sweet Child O' Mine" in the trailer and stuff. And so I mean, it's just kind of been timeless, and it really doesn't have a dated sound in any way, right? Like it's just a great rock song, so it's not even something where it's like, oh man, yeah, this definitely, Goodbye to You, Patti Smythe does a great job singing it, but it definitely sounds like it's from the 80s,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So.
No, I agree. Like this is just like in the annals of rock history. Like it just is a great rock song, and it will perennially be that way. I love it. All right. I think I know why you picked this next song, and it made me smile because I really, really like this song, and I hadn't heard it in a long time. So thank you for reintroducing me to Walk Like an Egyptian by the Bangles.
Yeah, this is one, sounds very distinctive, definitely has more of an 80s sound to it, but it's still one that, like, my kids even enjoy now. Like, I feel like it's kind of family friendly with this song, and so it gets played at, like, kids gatherings and stuff like that, and so they still enjoy it. But this one, on a personal note, I am Egyptian on my father's side, and this song came out about the time when kids discovered that I was Egyptian. So you can imagine the ridicule that went along with that. Or however old I was, 8 years old, 9 years old, and all the kids asked me if that's how I walk around. Because, of course, they had the video with, like, kind of the Egyptian hieroglyphic walk there that they did there. So, so this one, this one was a little more personal for me. But, still a great song.
Well, I hope it wasn't triggering for you as you listened to it.
I think what they call it, a microaggression. I think that's what it was.
Right. Yeah. It definitely was. At least a micro.
Yeah. I'm definitely suing the band, but I can't talk about it. Yeah.
Right. It's best not to. You don't want to introduce into court. Yeah, it's a good idea.
I've said too much. Yeah. Anyway. All right, your next pick. You went with Total Eclipse of the Heart by Bonnie Tyler.
Oh, yeah. I mean, we had to have a power ballad on our
Mm-hmm.
80s mix. I mean, we just had to. And in my opinion, this is like probably the greatest one of all time. Certainly one of the greatest. We can argue it if it's the greatest or not. But the it's like also a great karaoke song. I feel like a lot of these actually make for really good karaoke songs. You mentioned one earlier. I think there's just something about it. I don't know if it's just because they're older now and so like they're more well known and people are like, oh, I remember that, and they want to sing along to it, or there was just something about this music that you just want to pick up a mic and belt along with the singers. But absolutely love the song. I also think we've alluded to like mixes being put together of like songs where you don't really know the title or you get the title wrong all the time. This one I think could be one of it because I always want to just search for like, oh, what's the song with "Turn Around" in it?
Yes, I was gonna say, right. It's "Turn Around." The song "Turn Around."
Right. Because that's like basically the only part that I really know very well, but the lyrics are so good. And whenever she starts like really kind of screaming into the mic and all the feels are coming through, you can't help but to go along with it. It's amazing.
Totally agree. Had to be on here, and also an amazing music video. I don't know if you've sat through that, but it's really overly dramatic. Like we had so many things in the 80s, like music videos were such a big deal because MTV was like massive. So you were trying to get on MTV. And so they would make these really like cinematic videos for these songs. And in this one, you get like the explosions, near the end. And it's just, it's crazy. So
That's
anyway,
awesome.
worth checking out. But it is very overly dramatic.
I'll definitely have to check that out. I've been really getting back into music videos, funny enough, as part of the Super Awesome Mix podcast, like research. I've been kind of interested in like, yeah, what music video did go along with this? Because some of them are very creative. Others are just like, yeah, others are okay, but some of them are great. So I'll have to check that one out. All right. Before we get to our final track, which, again, it happened where we both picked the same song, so it's really exciting. We have one more, and it's your pick. And it is Dancing in the Dark by Bruce Springsteen.
Yeah, this was off of the Born in the USA album, which outside of Thriller might have been the biggest album in the 1980s. And it's an interesting story behind this one. Like they worked so long on that album, and then they think they're done. They've recorded all these tracks, and then the producer goes to Bruce and is like, "Hey, we just don't feel like we have a single." And so he sat down one night. He got really angry, actually, really frustrated, and so he wrote this song, "Dancing in the Dark." And if you listen to it in that context of frustration, it really does take on a whole new meaning. And it's one of my favorite Bruce Springsteen songs. But it's it was kind of born of that. It ends up so he writes the song. They go in the next day, and everybody loves it. It ends up being the first single released off of that album. And of course, goes to number one, and the whole album just goes crazy from there. So many hit songs from that particular album. But yeah, definitely one of my favorites. And of course, the music video, like we were just talking about music videos, famously features a very young Courtney Cox who gets pulled on stage to dance with Bruce.
Oh, wow. Nice. I did not know that.
You didn't know that? And there's kind of a funny story behind it. They did that in like Minnesota, like they did it in an actual concert setting. And Courtney Cox was one of like 3 or 4 actresses that they flew out there. And she didn't know she was going to be picked. She was just in this group of and they just told Bruce, yeah, just pull one of them on stage. And he just happens to pull up Courtney Cox. And it's like 10 years later that Friends comes on. And obviously she becomes a megastar from there. And in between, she had a role on like Family Ties and some other thing. Like she was working, but like you go back and it's just like, oh my gosh, there's super young Courtney Cox there on stage with Bruce Springsteen.
Yeah. Wow, that's really interesting. Yeah, I had no idea. Interesting. But going back to the song, I did not know that about about the background of the song. It is really interesting, and I it's funny because I called out the first verse that I really like because I felt like it spoke to a feeling I can be familiar with at times, where he opens up saying like, I get up in the evening, I got nothing to say, I come home in the morning, I go to bed feeling the same way, I ain't nothing but tired. And it's funny too that he's talking about getting up in the evening, like working a night shift basically, and going to bed in the morning, and just feeling kind of run down and all of that. And again, it's like I think that was the magic of Bruce that we've talked about, especially in his earlier stuff, is just connecting and talking about like what people feel. And so to know that was written in a moment where he's like, oh my gosh, you're making me like go and write a single for this album, makes a lot of sense. You can definitely see that come through.
All right, last song in the mix, and when we first submitted our 80s list to each other, we both had this pick on there. So, of course, had to be the last track we feature here, 99 Luftballons by Nina.
Yes, 99 Luftballons, or red balloons, of course, is what this translates to. Amazing song. I think first was introduced to the song from an episode of Scrubs, and then just because there's an amazing scene where Zach Braff's character imagines like something, I forget what the setup was, but something along the lines of like, what would be the happiest thing to happen in that like patient room? And then he just imagines a bunch of red balloons, like they're kicking around a bunch of red balloons while they're playing this song. And I absolutely loved that. Became addicted to that song. Also really love the cover by Goldfinger. They did like a rock version of this, which is really, really good. I listened to it a lot in high school. And of course she did also release an English version, but I agree with like some of the commentation. I agree with some of the commentators on that I like the German version. There's just something special about it, more so than the English version. So that's why I picked it, but I'd love to hear why you were going to throw this on the mix.
Yeah, I just think it's one of those songs, really unique in the sense that we've talked about this before. The internet obviously allows you to listen to music from all over the world, right? But I feel like if you were an international artist and you made it, like you made a single that made it across the world, like it's a massive hit. That's a notable accomplishment. And so I think that's what stood out to me about this one is I'm like, everybody knew this song, like everywhere, right? And you're right, like we heard the German version and we heard the English version. The only downside to the German version is that you can't really sing along to it unless you know German. I guess you could kind of do it just based on sound, but
right,
not as fun there maybe. But yeah, I think I picked it just because, I don't know, when I think of the 80s, this is like one of those things I remember. And I remember hearing it in the 80s, right? And it was like on the radio all the time. And everybody loved this song. But I also just think it's notable to think about, how would this artist have made it all the way here? Like what a massive hit you would have written to get around the world,
Yeah. No, it's really true. It's that is really crazy to think about. I think about that all the time we have listeners in, all parts of the world, so many nations kind of listen to our podcast. And I just think like how magical and crazy that is that, we record in New York and in Dallas and click a couple of buttons. And then now we've got people like in Australia and New Zealand and London and everywhere, like listening to our voices. It's
that's
magical,
also pretty
the internet. Cool stuff.
All right. Well, there you have it. It is our 80th super awesome mix for your collection. And this time it's an all 80s mixtape. So don't you worry. We're not going anywhere. We've got plenty of super awesome mixes to put together. So we'll get to work on that. And for Sammer, this is Matt. We'll see you next time. Super Awesome Mix is brought to you by DLM. Make shopping easy with DLM, the one-stop shop for all your casual clothing needs. Shop DLMsupplyco.com and enter the promo code AWESOME at checkout to save 15% off your first purchase. That's DLMsupplyco.com.